My name is Anna Shepard, and I did my project on the effects of adolescent anxiety on school performance. So, no matter what age a student is, mental illness can affect them. One of the most common mental illnesses seen in adolescents is anxiety. Oftentimes, when people see signs of anxiety, they do not take it seriously or act to fix the problem. This is usually due to the fact that the signs are invisible. Anxiety can go undetected until students are at their breaking point. Typically, these students who are suffering from anxiety are pushed aside and not aided to in the classroom. Adolescent anxiety is a real issue in schools, and these students deserve a voice and the right to be accommodated. Because of the lack of attention, these students are falling behind academically. So the problem with this is that in schools, teachers and other support staff are put in place to help all students succeed. However, there are a large number of adolescents suffering from anxiety who are going unnoticed. The average age a student develops anxiety is between 11 and 14 years old. That means that students in our elementary schools are suffering. The problem this research study will address is the alarming number of adolescents suffering from anxiety in the school systems and how this is affecting their school performance. I currently work as a kindergarten teacher at an elementary school in Birmingham. I have personally seen students suffer from anxiety even when they have not necessarily suffered from any trauma at home. The purpose of this study is to identify the number of students suffering from anxiety as well as evaluate the impact anxiety has on students' academic performance. The goal will be to see whether students are struggling in schools. The goal will be to see where students are struggling in schools and develop a plan to help them improve their school performance. Anxiety is a common response to any outside threat. This response becomes a mental illness when adolescents or adults develop an abnormal response to things that most people can cope with easily. According to the Child Mind Institute, their studies show that anxiety reaches 30% of students in schools. Of that 30%, only 20% care for their mental illness. The average ages these children develop anxiety was between 11 and 14 years old. Out of those adolescents suffering, 48% are mild, 37% are moderate, and 15% are severe. I compiled test scores on math assessments that were given in my classroom. In the bar graph, you can see the average scores my students with anxiety received compared to the scores my students without anxiety received. These students were only 5 to 6 years old. This is a kindergarten class that consists of 17 total students. Out of the 17, 2 of them have anxiety. It is important to note that the students with anxiety are not intellectually lower than the average student. However, when told to complete an assignment individually, this is how they scored. I pulled these 2 students aside on the Module 3 assessment. With one-on-one support but no extra prompting, these 2 students scored an 86 average compared to the original 40% average. The problem is that anxiety is invisible, therefore many children suffer greatly without ever being treated or cared for. This response becomes a mental illness because they cannot cope with it easily. So this is a little bit of background information used throughout this experiment. The definition of adolescence is any person between the ages of 10 and 19. Anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. The cognitive behavioral theory is something mentioned a lot throughout this experiment, and this is based on a cognitive theory of psychopathology. The cognitive model describes how people's perceptions of or spontaneous thoughts about situations influence their emotional behavior and often psychological reactions. The cognitive behavioral theory has been proven over many years in multiple studies, and researchers say that this is the best approach to working with someone with anxiety. This therapy focuses on what is happening in the now. The goal is to have the patient identify the dysfunctional thoughts and alter how they respond to them when they are fearing the worst. This therapy, with the help of the brain, adapts to everyday situations, causing the adolescent to perform better in schools and everyday life. If school professionals intervene early with their symptoms can significantly decrease, if not entirely disappear, in order for them to be successful in their academics. Academic performance is extremely important. Because of this, it's important to provide support to all students who need it. This includes those suffering from mental illnesses with silent symptoms. So for the action plan, we're going to start with the sampling method and description. So for the sampling method, the sampling technique will be cluster sampling. The students will be clustered by grades and in their original classrooms. Everything for this research will be kept to as normal as their everyday as possible to limit extra anxiety for any students. The experiment itself is a quasi-experimental research study. There will be mixed methods for collecting data. Data will be collected from the teachers running records of everyday behaviors and academic records of students. Data is also to be collected from test scores the day of the experiment. Last, the data will be collected from students based on their experiences. Because of this, it is important to keep students in their original classrooms with their homeroom teachers. Mount Laurel Elementary is where I teach. This consists of grades between kindergarten through 5th grade. The school is predominantly upper middle class. Out of all of the students, there are less than 15% on free and reduced lunch. The school contains 5 kindergarten classes, 4 first grade classes, 4 second grade classes, 4 third grade classes, 2 fourth grade classes, and 2 fifth grade classes. Total, there are 21 general education classrooms, and there is 1 self-contained special education classroom. The class size averages roughly to 22 students per teacher. In this research study, there are a few different collaborative resources being used. The first are the general education teachers who are in charge of leading the lessons the first and second 9 weeks. These teachers will also be giving the assessment the first 9 weeks. Their responsibility is also to collect work samples, progress monitor every 3 weeks, and observe students regularly. The second resource is the school counselor. He or she is responsible for making sure the students who are suffering from anxiety receive cognitive behavioral therapy each week during their second 9-week grading period. The third resource are the paraprofessionals that will be responsible for implementing the accommodation on assessments during the second 9 weeks. The fourth resource is the Harcourt math curriculum and assessments. This will be used to teach the classes and assess them. The last resource is the observation form that will be filled out by teachers. This will be where the teachers write down behaviors they are noticing during the lessons. This research study will take place over a course of 2 9-week periods. The first 9 weeks, teachers will keep running records of how students act in the classroom. They should be progress monitoring every 3 weeks to keep an accurate representation of how the students are doing. The second 9 weeks, teachers will give assessments with accommodations for those students with anxiety. Again, progress monitoring every 3 weeks and record the difference in scores. The data for this research will be collected over the 2 9-week period, and the teachers will be progress monitoring and collecting work samples. At the end of the 2 9-week grades, they will be compared to see if the accommodations and the extra support improved the students' academic performance. Internal and external validity of instruments. The lesson and work and assessments given come from the Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Into Math curriculum. This curriculum has been adopted by the entire Shelby County school system. It is a very reliable program to teach elementary school students math skills. Teachers will follow this curriculum for their grade level exactly, so there is not a variance in lesson plans between classes. This curriculum's worksheet pages and assessments will be used in the collection of data. These assessments are very reliable and in line with the instruction given. Running records and observations will be taken by students using the same recording sheet. This will show the teachers exactly what information researchers want to know and will avoid any confusion or miscommunication. With the assessment and observation forms being the same, any threat to the validity of these instruments will be controlled and limited. Since this experiment is taking place in an elementary school with minors, every protocol should be followed in order to ensure students and parents know exactly what is taking place. The person in charge of the study will ensure the safety of all those involved in the research at all times. The parents or guardians of every participant will fill out a consent form before their child will participate in the study. Any potential way that participants could be harmed will be taken into account and handled before the study begins. All forms, test scores, and results will be kept confidential from the study. Once the research is over, no names will be released with the findings of this study. All participants and parents will be notified of their rights if they would like to remove themselves from the study at any time or any reason they deem necessary. That is okay. Anxiety is increasing in children and teens each year. If gone untreated, anxiety can increase the risk of depression and the risk of school failure. Teachers are trained to seek out this behavior and notice it. However, 1 in 8 children suffer from anxiety, and it's hard to be aware until the child is at their breaking point. Anxiety affects one's working memory, and they have a harder time remembering information. While this mental illness will cause students to work less efficiently, it will be inconsistent due to the level of anxiety always changing. This factor is difficult for teachers and parents to find solutions for. More consistent mental illnesses or disabilities are easier to manage and accommodate. The goal is to identify these students and give them the support they need in order to excel academically, like they are fully capable of. Elementary age students can develop anxiety as early as 11. Their brains are more worried about everything that can go wrong instead of focusing on the content being taught. Because of this, anxiety has a negative effect on school performance. The goal of the study is to prove that if accommodated, students with anxiety can score higher and perform better academically. In order to see student achievement, the data would have to show an increase in test scores after students suffer from anxiety go through the proper therapy and receive accommodations. The next steps for this research project is to carry out the experiment. Ideally, this would begin in the beginning of the school year of August 2020 and last until the second 9 weeks, December of 2020. In order for the experiment to happen, the school would have to approve and all participants would have to return their 2 forms declaring consent and that they're aware of what is taking place as well as their rights. So improvements for this study, the main improvements I would make in my original plan would be to type out lessons for each grade to teach. This would decrease the margin of error that could happen. Each teacher would be teaching the exact same lesson, so ideally the data would be more accurate between students. Additional research that could be done in order to improve student achievement would be to research teaching strategies that would help students with anxiety. This would help teachers to understand what to do in their instruction to help students. Also, teachers could go through professional development before the experiment begins in order to help them better understand the impact of anxiety themselves. These last 2 slides have the references used for this experiment. Thank you.